Hello, it's Tony here from Lockster Reads. I just thought I'd do a quick reading update video. As you know, the last time we all met in this location, I had got 20 odd books out of the library. I have renewed them all, so they all now finish on the same day, which is the 26th of June, and I am going to try and read them all by the 26th of June. This has not started very well because I have done the usual Tony Cross thing of nibbling at 5 different books rather than concentrating at one book at a time. But I thought I'd give you a quick update of where I was with the one that I am most likely to finish, which is a book that will undoubtedly upset YouTube because they've got a bizarre thing about discussing Nazi Germany, Adolf Hitler, etc., etc. I'm not monetized, so it doesn't actually matter at this point. But YouTube needs to come up with a better rule than making people who make historical videos or read books about the Second World War have to euphemism around the discussions of that topic. It is a terrible thing to talk about, but it's a normal thing to talk about. Nobody's out there going, "Oh, you can't discuss Genghis Khan because he killed lots of people. You can't discuss Stalin because he killed lots of people. But Hitler and the Holocaust." Now, I know Hitler and the Holocaust comes with a lot of very nasty, unpleasant people who think everybody is wonderful. In fact, part of that is going to be in the book I'm talking about most. But that's not. You can find ways of managing those accounts by people complaining about them, YouTube. So you need to grow up, YouTube. That's all I'm going to say. Stop. The Nazis were experts at coming up with euphemisms for terrible things. Don't make other people euphemize the Nazis because it softens it. And whoever's in charge of this policy at YouTube is an idiot. Right. So, on that note, the book I'm currently reading and I'm most likely to finish is The Unwritten Order, Hitler's Role in the Final Solution by Peter Longerich. This came out of a lot of you are probably not aware of a story from some time ago. There is a man called David Irving who was once a historian and is now something else. He wrote books about the Second World War and about Nazi Germany, and he got hypnotized by the myth of Hitler, and he became something of a Holocaust. I suppose denier is the only word that's possible to use. And what happened was a historian called Deborah Lipstadt wrote a book which called him a Holocaust denier. He took her to court for libel, and he lost. And part of that process was a number of historians providing reports on basically his methodology, but looking at particular sections of it. Now, one of those people was Longerich, who wrote 2 reports. I should stop waving Hitler around because it's probably not going to help with YouTube. He wrote 2 reports, and one of which dealt with basically this question of Hitler's role in the final solution, because people like David Irving like to pretend that Hitler had nothing to not nothing to do with, but wasn't responsible for wasn't the person behind the mass murder of the Jews. They like to think that his people like Himmler usually gets most of the blame. Heydrich got carried away and took his rhetoric and ran with it to mass murder. So what Longerich is doing in this book is basically analysing the process of how Hitler's anti-Semitism became. Now, it's usually called the final solution, but that is a euphemism in and of itself. I'm going to call it the murder solution. So how he went from being a rabid anti-Semite to the murder solution. And it breaks down from like his early period before he became Chancellor of Germany. So he's like there's some discussion about when he firmly became an anti-Semite. There's and then it goes in the rise to power how they dialed it down a bit when they were trying to get elected, because you don't want to be, you want to get more general voters to vote for you, not just other rabid anti-Semites, because there aren't millions of those. Well, there might be, globally, but you know what I mean. And then through the early phases of that Nazi rule, and into the war, and through to the murder solution. Now, there is an argument to be had that perhaps the explicit intention wasn't necessarily mass murder to begin with, but the implication of his language, the way he spoke about the Jews, the way he spoke about their fate, the way he explicitly compared them to bacteria, to rats, to other things, basically he says whatever his intentions were, he wanted to get rid of the Jews, and the murder solution was fundamentally inevitable from his earliest anti-Semitic. Once he turned that anti-Semitic rhetoric into power, the murder solution was the only option that was going to be left, especially as it became a European war, and he had control over hundreds of millions of Jews in various parts of Europe, helped by some of those European countries themselves. So this book is talking about that. I'm about halfway through. It's very well buttressed with references, not just in English but in German. One of the things, a little sort of brief thing about what I do with a non-fiction book, when I'm trying to take it seriously at least. First thing I do is I read the introduction and make a note of what the author is, how the book came to be, and what the author is intending to do, what their argument is, which is usually outlined in the introduction. Then I go and look at the notes and the bibliography. If a historian is writing about non-English language subjects, and the bibliography and the references contain nothing but English references and bibliography, then you have to question what we're seeing in that book. I'm not saying you can't write a history of the Holocaust without but you're not going to write you're relying on secondary sources at that point, and I don't think that's ideal for proper, in inverted commas, history. I think with popular history you can get away with it a little more, but the problem is popular history is the history that most people read, and so sometimes you get a situation where popular historians create a version of an event that isn't necessarily supported by other historians, or by so for example, Anthony Beevor being the sort of go-to for Arnhem, Max Hastings being the go-to for Normandy, when there are issues with both of those writers. There are other historians that have focused on some of those issues. Max Hastings in particular, he's on my mind because I've got his Normandy book to read. But Max Hastings in particular is very down on the British Army and very up on the German Army, and tends to view the British as stolid and unimaginative and badly led and bad. Basically, Tommy wasn't a soldier, is what I've heard. Wasn't meant to be a soldier, is what I've heard. Whereas the Germans are cutting edge, get go, or logistically have great fantastic equipment. Blah blah blah. That's not necessarily the case. So that's a thing to bear in mind. I'm not saying they're in no case are they dishonest. They have a bee in their bonnet about a kind of approach. So I look at the notes, look at the bibliography, and if and when I'm reading the book, I think, oh, there's a part. This is a particularly interesting part within this. I try and find the books within it to read. A a lot of the time, sometimes it's hard because some of these things are out of print. Some of these things are in German, and I don't speak German. I did apply to do a Holocaust Studies course at Goldsmiths a long time ago, and they, quite rightly, I think, pointed out that they didn't really want people doing a postgraduate in Holocaust Studies that didn't have another key European language to study it in. They mentioned German and Hebrew or Yiddish as the sort of main ones that would be useful, but also equally Russian or any place where the Germans committed mass murder. So I'm pretty confident that this book is well researched and well sourced, which is why it's so interesting. It's also written I think for a general reader, because I think it was basically written for lawyers and the judge to understand. And well, the original reports were, and then he's turned it into this book. You can actually get. I don't think it's in print anymore, but after the Irving judgment came out, Penguin published Justice Gray. I think it's Justice Gray. His entire judgment from the case in a Penguin book, which was it was relatively dry reading, but actually it's a great introduction. If you're interested in studying history, I think it's a great introduction to historical methodology, because he looks at all. But I won't waffle on anymore. I've been talking for 11 minutes about a book I haven't even finished yet. I keep waving it around. YouTube is definitely going to be upset about that. But yeah, so that's where I am at the moment. That's the book I've got the most through. I've put everything else down because I want to finish that, and then I'm going to go one book at a time, starting with the ones that I've already got a chunk through, which is Bury the Chains and the Eagle and the Heart. I'm working my way through a poetry collection as well, but they're always a month over a process of a long period of time. So there we are. My book update. I have also launched a Doctor Who channel called Locks to Who. So if you're interested in my thoughts, I'm working my way through the entire the entire run of classic Doctor Who, from An Unearthly Child in 1963 to the TV movie in 1996. I thought I'd set up a separate channel for Doctor Who stuff because it's very easy for me to talk about Doctor Who in detail at the drop of a hat. So I thought I'd put it in a safe place where if you have no interest in Doctor Who, you don't have to listen to me waffling on about it. There you go. Have a good day, and I will speak to you next week at some point.